What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you for joining me. I'm Tim Laskus, and you're listening to The Tim Laskus Show, episode 44. And before I go into my fantastic guest today, let me ask you, who out there would love to start their own podcast? Who out there wants to throw their hat in the ring and join this wild, crazy circus that will bring you notoriety and an ability to make connections with influencers of different industries and even monetize your podcast? Raise your hands. If you're interested, go to timlaskus.com where you can pick up your free podcast launch cheat sheet. Go to timlaskus.com, pick up your free podcast launch cheat sheet today. And now, my featured guest is Darieth Chisolm. She's an Emmy Award-winning TV host, former NBC News anchor, coach, speaker, author, visibility, and media strategist. She tells a story that I was blown away by, where she, after her divorce, gave up everything, said, "See you, I'm out of here," moved to Jamaica. And she spent about 6 months down in Jamaica regrouping and coming back with a vengeance where she's on fire. So you want to listen to this story because you definitely will be inspired. So enjoy.
The Tim Laskus Show, in search of entrepreneurial gold. Tim digs deep into the minds of his guests, entertaining, down to earth, and informative. Now, here's your host, Tim Laskus.
Welcome, listeners. Today's featured guest is Darieth Chisolm. Darieth, thank you for being on the show.
Oh, so excited about being here with you today, Tim. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, I appreciate your time. And it sounds like we have a lot in common. We were just talking about how we both have just got away, left the States, and went to another country and said, "See ya, adios, we're out of here." You took off and ran away to Jamaica, and I took off and ran away to Costa Rica. But tell the listeners a little bit about what happened. Why did you take off to Jamaica?
Yeah, it's interesting. I literally ran away to a place called Runaway Bay, Jamaica. It really came at a time in my life about a year and a half ago that I had divorced and was at a point of saying, do I want to stay in Pittsburgh? Do I want to come down to Florida and live where I had a condo? Or, do I want to make a big jump and go run away to an island? And I mean, I know lots of people have had that dream that they just want to run away to a beach somewhere. And that is in fact what I did. And so I took out a condo and was there about 6 months, literally got off the grid. I slowed down production and everything that I was doing and took some time for myself to refuel, regenerate, to really think about what my next steps were going to be in life. And as often as I've heard people say, "God, I would just I'd love to get off the grid or just take some time away," it was a beautiful time in my life. And I have to say, I'm glad that I did it. I'd have no plans of going back there, but I can tell you that it was awesome during the time that I was there.
Well, I've never been to Jamaica, but I've always wanted to go. And I remember watching, I don't know if it was Anthony Bourdain or somebody went down to Jamaica and really focused on the food and the culture. And do they have an area where people cook on these open big, I don't know, they're like metal drums that they cut in half and they cook on them?
Yeah.
Jerk, what do they call it?
That's how they do jerk chicken.
Jerk chicken, yes. Yeah, it looked so delicious. So you had some of that while you were there?
Oh my goodness, that's what you live off, that, and red stripe beer and mango and jackfruit and all of these exotic fruits. Breadfruit is roasted on those crates along with, obviously lots of lamb and pork and some beef. So it is a very interesting style of life. Of course, it is a third world country. There's a great deal of poverty. But if you understand that and are there to give and are there to support in any way that you can and really embrace the people in the culture, it was such a beautiful experience on many levels.
Well, I bet. I'm sure it was life-changing, and we could probably have a whole show just talking about Jamaica.
Yeah, we
but
could.
Let's go ahead and shift. Tell the listeners a little bit about yourself professionally, and what are you currently working on?
Yeah, so I am a life and business coach. I primarily work with female entrepreneurs to help them design the life and business of their dreams. And really, I focus on 3 areas, visibility being the first one. I spent some 25 years in television and still do a great deal of television and production work. I'm also an Emmy Award winner. I've produced a very successful video podcast series as well as podcast series. I wrote a book. I write for several publications. So I am keenly and closely aware of people's needs to be visible. But it's interesting that visibility doesn't just start with what you look like on camera. It's really internal. And so much of my work is with clients who are really looking to move past those blocks that are keeping them from standing in their power and being more visible. And we work through some of that. And then we get on to looking at viable online and offline marketing opportunities for them to expose their business, their brand to their ideal customers and clients. And I really enjoy that work. It's really brought me the great opportunity to work with women all over the world. I travel a lot. Sometimes I meet with people face to face to work with them. Sometimes it's obviously over the internet, the beauty of, the internet and cell phones and laptops. So that's primarily what I do. I still spend a great deal of time in television, so I get to work on some fun projects. I've got a book out there. I travel and I speak and promote the book. So it's truly this location-independent, freedom-based lifestyle that I chose to jump at. I left a 25-year successful television news career about 4 years ago to do this, and I haven't looked back. And I have to say it was worth all of the ups and downs along the way.
Well, that's incredible, and I'm sure the listeners are they're hanging on. They're like, yeah, this is great. To be able to hear someone's story of being able to make that jump and to just be free and do what they want and feel, alive again. Now, you had talked about visibility and the visibility of some of your clients inside. So are you talking about maybe some like negative messages that they either have internally about who they are and how that holds them back? Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Absolutely. I think we remain stuck and stalled when we don't allow ourselves to push back the fear and the blocks that are holding us back from being visible. And it's no one's fault, literally. I think we all struggle with that. But those of us who don't choose to move past it, especially in business, it shows up in lack of income, in lack of resources, in lack of success. And I think when we move through that and work through it and really unpeel the layers that have been piling up on us from years of our previous failures or voices in our head that say we can't do it, and or voices from the people around us, when we move past that and really step in and stand in our power and choose to be more visible, it's like the gateway opens up and there's a flood of opportunity that awaits when we simply, open up to it and make ourselves available to receive it and then get to work.
I love that. And it sounds like that you really don't focus too much on who's to blame and how those messages got there. But the most important step is to get over it.
Absolutely. We could spend days and weeks pointing the finger at why things have happened to us and who's to blame and, what we did wrong. Oftentimes it's really the self-blame and the self-pity that is more traumatizing than perhaps our mommy-daddy issues. But it is in choosing to release those voices and reclaiming a more powerful voice in our head and in our heart that begins to sing to us in a way that, we want to wake up, we want to dance, we want to take risks, we want to be more available to receive. And it's just a process. And, the beautiful thing about coaching, and particularly the style of coaching that I do, albeit life and business, it's still somewhat transformational, is really getting to that place and turning it around and projecting and focusing on what it is that we do want versus what it is that we don't want to show up in our lives.
For sure. And if someone comes to you and says, Darieth, I want to work with you, what's the process? How does it work? What does it look like? Is it online through email? Is it over the phone? Or do they have to commit for 15 years with it? What does it look like?
Yeah, so it always starts with what I call a clarity session. I really want to get to know the person and to really decide, are you my ideal client? And equally so, they need to understand the primary 4 areas that I coach in and whether or not I am the coach for them. So all of my my private coaching sessions begin with a free clarity call so we can get clear about what's there. Generally, most of my clients coach with me for a minimum of 6 months. I mean, change does not happen overnight. And so I love a good 6-month commitment where we're working together several times a month over the phone. All of the sessions are recorded so we can refer back to them. But literally getting clear on some things, putting together a strategic plan of action that I get to hold my clients accountable for and they get to show up and do. And then we move forward. And from there, obviously, it's about unfolding those plans and being brave enough to put the things into place that need to be there. Sometimes it does start with just a general 90-minute strategy session. I say, take me for a test drive. You don't have to make a 6-month commitment. Let's commit to at least 90 minutes. Let's take a look at where things are. And if it makes sense after that, let's go. And if not, I'm going to be around. I'm going to be here for a long time doing this.
Yeah. And it sounds like it really needs to be a good fit for you and for them. And it needs to work so that, you really connect with that person and that, you have what they're looking for. And are they ready to be clients? Sometimes people just aren't ready. They make that call, but they're really not ready to change or commit. Have you had people who call you up who are like that? Like, what's kind of the percentage of people that you hear that just call up and say, hey, Darieth, I need your help, but then they're just not ready?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tim, because I think some people don't know that they're not ready. And then it's in the process of saying, well, okay, so you've clearly identified that these are the areas that I can support you in. Are you ready to move forward? And oftentimes I think it's masked by them making the financial commitment, but sometimes it's about them being ready to make change. And, we know that when a person has to commit to change, all kind of stuff can happen. But it is in that decision that change happens and people really do get tangible results. And so there are times when they just aren't ready, and that's okay. Coaching is, and you're certainly aware of this being a coach yourself, it's a very interesting dynamic that a person has to fully show up in and be responsible for not only their past actions, but more importantly, the future steps that they are preparing themselves to make. Because, of course, coaching is about moving forward. And oftentimes when I sense there's some reluctance there, it's that the person is maybe not quite ready. Now, as the coach, I'm still there to say, okay, I get it. I realize this could be a bit challenging. It feels a little strange, but that's why you hired me. That's why, star athletes have coaches in their lives to help them push them beyond those limitations, those personal limitations. So coaching in all of its beautiful dynamics does require that a person truly prepare themselves for the type of change that can happen.
Yeah. And change can be scary. Sometimes people, they know they want change, but they're just kind of used to the way things are, although they're not happy with the way they are, but it's what they know. It's kind of like, well, yeah, it's not the greatest life, but at least I know it. And I don't know what's on the other side.
Mm-hmm, exactly. But we don't know what's on the other side of tomorrow either. But we wake up with the expectation that we're going to live today and be here tomorrow.
Yes.
And the experience of coaching and making radical change in one's life is, in my opinion, no different.
Yes. Well, I love how you set up your coaching sessions where you get to understand the person and what their needs are, help them develop a plan. And then having 6 months is a great time for them and for you to be able to see them grow, because sometimes people kind of mask what's going on in the beginning and you just kind of get surface stuff. But then as you kind of get into it, you start to see some of the kind of more serious issues that arise. And then, so when you have that 6-month commitment, that really gives everybody a chance to give that client their best opportunity of being successful.
Absolutely.
So since you've been doing this and working in coaching, you gave up that career. What are some tips that you have for entrepreneurs out there who are listening, or maybe entrepreneurs who are saying, I want to do what you're doing, Darieth. I want to be able just to kind of leave things behind. I'm sick of this job. Do you have any tips for them?
Well, I have several of them. And the first one is that you've got to be really clear about what your why is. And we often have dreams and desires to do different things. And whether it's to quit our job or, to leave and pack up and go to another country and live, there has to be a significant why behind it. It's often when we focus entirely on the why, we get the momentum, the fortitude, the drive that's necessary beyond the practical action. I mean, we can all map out a plan, right? We can all figure out what steps need to be taken. In fact, most entrepreneurs know that. The difference is that the person who is totally focused on the why is more likely to succeed because the why is just that big. So I often tell entrepreneurs, be really clear about why you're doing what you're doing and why you want what you want. And if you were to achieve that intended outcome, what does that mean to you? And, that would be my first tip, is to be clear about what your why is. And if you don't have one, go get one, because that is what's going to keep you when it gets rough. And we know it gets rough as an entrepreneur because you're so committed to your why that you're not going to give up when the challenges arise. The other thing I would say is let done be okay. Done is better than perfect. And we often spend a lot of times trying to get things perfect before we put it out there, before we believe in it, before we think the world is going to believe in it, when in fact, just getting something done and then moving towards perfection along the way is where we start to see success start to happen. So remind yourself every day when things don't show up as perfect as you'd like, and you're not quite ready to do it, that it's done and you can improve it along the way. And I'll add a third piece to that, and that is allow it to be awkward before it's elegant. Entrepreneur, for those of us, now I tell people, I've been an entrepreneur for 40 years. I started my first business when I was 8 years old. It was an orange juice stand. And I won't go into the details about it, but I will tell you that I learned a lot even at 8 years old. But the premise of this story is that really I never really understood what it meant to be an entrepreneur, because none of us are really raised that way unless we grow up with a family of entrepreneurs. So we learn it on the fly, and there's some awkwardness around it that makes us uncomfortable. We need to lean into the awkwardness, allow it to be there, so we can allow it to grow into being much more elegant. And it's with the mistakes that we learn. Oftentimes we make mistakes and we're like, oh my God, I can't do this. This isn't working. It's a failure. No, embrace those, allow them to be there, learn from them, accept the awkwardness, and allow it to grow into being elegant.
Powerful tips. And just to recap for the listeners, is be clear of your why, let done be okay, don't worry about being perfect, and be okay and allow awkwardness before you become elegant. And those are wonderful, really great tips. And I just wanted to briefly touch upon the why. If you had a client who was sitting with you and you asked that question to them and you said, okay, why do you want to work for yourself? And they said, well, I want to make money. What would be your response?
And what's the purpose for the money? Money has to have a purpose. What does that money buy you? So what, you want to make money? We all want to make money. What's the purpose for it? And is that purpose so connected to your why that you're willing to do whatever it takes to get it? It's interesting. My why around when I left Channel 11, I had a very successful television news career at the NBC affiliate in Pittsburgh. And I didn't have to leave. But what I wanted, my why, was really associated with spending more time with my son, who was going into his senior year of high school. And it was January, and he was a junior, and I knew that by September it was going to be his senior year, and he'd be off to college after that. And I was so busy working at the station. I had an aerial fitness studio at the time, and I'd started with a network marketing company, so I was extremely busy. So it wasn't so much about the money, it was about the desire to spend as much time with my son before he left to go off to college. And even more so, and this was the pain point for me, but also the pleasure point, was I realized I had been to like 2 of his football games in all of his 3 years in high school, and football was his most important thing. And I just could not see myself in the fall not being in the stands watching him play during his senior year. So my focus became, that's all I saw, was that I was going to build these businesses to get the money to a point where I could afford to leave my high-paying 6-figure television news career job. And I just, my vision, my why, was I was going to be in the stands and watch him play football every single Friday night. And I did. And by September, I'd become the 54th highest paid distributor out of 70,000 other distributors. I had successfully built the aerial fitness studio, and I was in the stands for every one of his games. And, I'm proud to say that little boy now is going into his senior year at Vanderbilt University, where he's
Wow.
also playing football. But that was my why. So, as much as, I could have tied it to money, and certainly it was because I needed the money in order to do that. The why was I was just not prepared to sacrifice not seeing him, knowing that he was going to be gone off to college and I would have little time with him. So you got to know your why, and it has to be compelling.
Yes. And the why is never money. The why is just right on the surface, but you take them to a deeper level to really get that understanding of why. Because initially so many people get caught up, well, I just want to do it for the money. But when you're working with your clients, you dig deeper. You don't take that as an answer. You keep going below, keep peeling away those layers to get to that why. And that's fantastic.
That's why I said it's got to have purpose. It can't just be dollar signs. It has to have a purpose.
Yeah, and so true. And also that second tip that you offered about, just do and don't worry about being perfect. And that's one that I think a lot of people get caught up on is they think, well, if I'm going to have a business or online business, my website's got to be perfect, got to have the perfect logo, I got to have the perfect business cards, I got to have the perfect this and that. No, just do it. Get something up there and get over that being perfect. Whatever that is, we have this kind of fantasy of what perfect is. And if we stay in that fantasy land, we'll never meet kind of that criteria. So you're saying just go ahead and get it done. Don't worry about being perfect. Get it going. Get over that hurdle.
Done is better than perfect.
Because perfect will get you stuck and you'll never be anywhere. You'll sit there 3 years and you haven't done anything because it's still not perfect. And just powerful stuff. But, you had talked about as an 8-year-old girl, selling lemonade or, and just having a little stand there. So was that the kind of the first moment that you said, oh man, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to work for myself. Does it go all the way back to being 8?
It seriously does. I tell this story. It's actually in my book, but the truth of the matter is I learned 5 things, 3 really, really important things in being business. And the first one was, the name of my orange juice stand was Bam Bam's Juicy Juice. And I knew that, I always tell people, you've got to have a product or a service that is somewhat different, but really is the gateway for people to know, like, and trust you. And so I did, I don't know where I came up with orange juice and not lemonade, but I knew that was different than the other kids in the neighborhood who had lemonade. And then I used red Kool-Aid in my orange juice. So I had this red orange juice. So I had a different product, so to speak. I knew that location mattered. So it wasn't good enough for me to drag my signs and my stand and this red orange juice down to the curb at 6631 Clifton in Detroit at my Grammy's house. I dragged it down to the corner, which was 3 houses down, and set up my stand there because there was people traveling down 4 streets and not just coming down Clifton Street. And ironically, at that age, it made sense to me. Location. And the third and most important thing I figured out was leverage. And you want to be successful in business, you have to figure out how to leverage. So my way back then was I had other friends in the area as they saw that Bam Bam's Juicy Juice was doing well. They wanted to do the same thing. So, we anteed up more money, had my grandmother go buy more oranges, and we would make these big containers of red orange juice at my grandmother's house. They paid me. There was some extra money in that from them bringing their money. And then they went out and, and their signs had to say Bam Bam. That was my nickname, by the way. So it had to say Bam Bam. And they were on like 4 or 5 other corners. So leverage, right? So I tell people, you got to have a good product or service. It's a gateway for people to know, like, and trust you. Location, and then leverage. But then the other 2 things that I figured out as well is that, supply and demand can put you out of business quickly. So when the prices of oranges rose. That changed the whole production. And then my grandmother
Oh,
decided she wouldn't do it anymore. And then, of course, it was a seasonal business. So the winters in Detroit are bad. So that didn't last. It only
wow.
lasted a summer and a half. But it's interesting that even at that age, those are still principles that I think apply in most businesses, especially brick and mortar businesses, but definitely in business. So.
You were a wise 8-year-old. My goodness. I mean, to understand product and how to differentiate
Well,
yourself
I
and
don't know that I knew that then,
niching,
though, Tim. In all fairness,
leverage.
I don't know that I knew it then. But as I look back on it, those were things that worked, that made sense. And it's interesting that it truly does apply in business today for whether you're 18, or 88.
Wow. The only thing you left out is like paying the bullies in your neighborhood to go take care of those other stands. Take them
Right.
out.
We
Pay
just put
up.
them out of business because
We
people
got to
like
put you
Bam
on.
Bam's Juicy Juice.
Bam Bam wasn't just in the name. It was also, Bam Bam, they knew what was going to happen if they tried to come on your territory. So
Right.
that is a great story, Darieth. Now, with this whole, you with the oranges and having the Kool-Aid and mixing it and doing all this, did you have the talk? Did anyone sit you down and say, Darieth, now you're making this money, this is how you save it, and this is how you spend it or don't spend it?
I'm sure that didn't happen. And there was extra money, obviously, and I used it for whatever I did when I was 8 years old. But it became really clear to me the importance of earning money when I was about 12 or 13. And we were really poor. My mother raised three children, and one winter the refrigerator went out, and we didn't have money for the refrigerator, and we actually put all the food on the back porch for the entire winter. That summer, the stove wasn't working, so we ended up using microwaves and hot plates. And it was also the summer that we all got paper routes. So I was throwing papers and literally selling encyclopedias door to door as a way to make some extra money. For about 2 years, it was rough for us during that time, and we were, as a family, lucky to rub two dimes together to make things matter. And I can remember wanting these Jordache jeans, and my mother telling me, as we headed back to school in the fall, that one summer when the stove wasn't working, that no, you can't have this because we're getting a new stove. And I think about that. How many kids these days don't get to, they can't opt for having a pair of Jordache jeans because you need the extra money to buy a stove. And, at the time I was obviously sad about it. I was bummed out about it. I was a little angry about it. But I think what it did for me was infuse in me this sense of, I will not live this way. And at some point in my life, I'm going to make different changes about how I make money and what I do with it. And and as bad as it was, it changed things for me. And by the time I was 19 and I was in college with a journalism degree, I really started my first official business, which was Prelude Services. I had a vending machine company, and I serviced several vending machines throughout the city of Detroit. And that was how I made money to put myself through college. And I always have had a business ever since. I've always had a side hustle, so to speak, ever since. And so I was fortunate that my experience in business really came out of the necessity to hustle, but I truly enjoy what I do now. And there's less strain around money because I learned to change my money story. And I think we all have them. We grow up with them, and they're imparted based on our families. But no, we're not taught that. I tell people there's a couple things that we aren't taught when we're children. One is to figure out what to do with money. We glean it based on our experience, right? We know what's happening, but we're really not taught. But it's absorbed based on what's going on in our environment. So then we develop our own money stories. We do the same thing in some instances with relationships. We watch them, but we're not really told how best to manage them. So it's things like that I think as we mature as adults that we have to pay very close attention to. And it's about really changing our mindset if it's locked in an old programming that is around scarcity and limitation, because we keep breeding it until we make the changes.
Yeah, and it sounds like your struggles early on within your family and watching that and having to pitch in, and although as difficult as it may have been, it really shaped you and who you are today and made you resilient and just kind of a go-getter and to go out and create your own. And so that was kind of although it wasn't fun, it really formed and shaped who you are today.
Yeah, I mean, I tell people when they, why do you use the word hustle? Hustle and Heart is my brand, and my book is called Hustle. The show is called Hustle and Heart. I use the word often, and it's because I grew up in that sense of with a hustle. And if you ask people about it in the past, they would say, "Oh, that's such a negative connotation." Well, I never saw it as that. I saw it as a means of working hard and really thinking creatively about the things that I wanted to do and getting it done because I had to. And now I use the word heart because, if you do a lot of hustling and there's no real love for what you're doing, if you're not passionate, if you are not in a joyful state, then hustling is hard. So I often put those two words together, hustle and heart, so that you really are loving your journey.
Well, I love that. And, for you, hustle is a part of you. That it's not just, you didn't just come up with that. It's just to be a kind of a cool word to throw out there. But it really, after people hear your story, it's like, wow, that now it makes sense why you chose to use hustle and heart. And now we started off the show talking about Jamaica and how you got away. And as entrepreneurs, we all go through periods where we just are like at wit's end. We can't take it anymore. We're done. We're stressed out mentally. It sounds like you were in a place right before you took off for Jamaica. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about what that pain was like for you and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, and as I think about it now, I don't know that I associated it so much with pain as much as I was associating it with change. I had been in a very good 22-year marriage, but we had decided to divorce, and I had a somewhat happy divorce. I mean, literally, it wasn't the stressful, draining divorce that I know many people unfortunately go through. And I made the choice to leave the house that we built together and raised our son in. And at the time, I thought, well, I could either choose to stay in Pittsburgh. I had a condo here in Florida, so I dumped a bunch of stuff here. And then I literally packed up 9 suitcases and moved away to Jamaica. And I had been there a couple of times. I knew a few people, and I had a friend there. And so I stayed there. But once I got there, this was the strange thing that happened because I had been so busy between, the station and working and my businesses, and I had just finished the 2nd season of Hustle and Heart TV, and the book was published, and I was doing some coaching and some speaking, and I hadn't stopped. And then I got on the beach and I laid there for 4 or 5 days, and I was like, whoa, what's going on? Like, it was the strangest feeling. And then I chose to lean into it more, and it took me a while to unwind. It was literally like 3 weeks of like, Darieth, it's okay. Like, you're fine. You're going to be fine. Take the time. And then when I realized how incredible it was to recharge and to replenish and to get focused is when I chose to stay longer, literally, and say, you need more of this. And this is this season in your life for a break and for change. And just as I was, it was about maybe about 5 months in, and I said, okay, I'm getting kind of bored. I can't drink any more Red Stripe. It's time to get back on the saddle and get back to coaching and get back to the States. And I was missing connecting with people. I faced a major surgery. I literally had to fly off the island and undergo a major hysterectomy, and I'd never been sick before. And so as I laid there recovering in the hospital for about a week, and then also coming out of, during that time in Jamaica, a not so good relationship, I decided I wouldn't go back. It was time for me to get back on the saddle, for me to start coaching, for me to start speaking, and life just changed. And it was the best rest because it prepared me for what this last nearly year has been about, which has been a lot of traveling and a lot of beautiful events and meeting a lot of people and a lot of changing people's lives in many ways. So I was meant for this, and I'm glad that I gave myself the opportunity to experience that season of down so that I could be charged for this up.
Sure. Well, it sounds like you got a taste of Jamaica therapy, so to speak. And I'm not talking about smoking that stuff down there. I'm just talking about laying on the beach and relaxing, palm trees and coconuts, and going down to those those areas where they have that wonderful food. And sometimes the change is what we need. We need to get out of where we're at to get some perspective. And it sounds like that's what you did, and it worked out well for you.
It did. It really did. And not to go into the next layer of my life in this call, but I was able to do that successfully, and then obviously came to realize that a relationship that I was in there was not proving to be supportive or successful for me. So I was able to transition out of it. But it taught me a lot, because I faced in a very short period of time the three things that I think most people get sidetracked with when they're building a business. First off is physical and health, and a major surgery like I underwent can obviously derail anyone, and yet I had to move through it. The other thing was relationship, and it's relationships sometimes can take us out of the game, and that one was proving to do that, but I knew I was not available for that. And then being off the grid for 6 months. I mean, literally I was watching my income dry up. So it was about making some new decisions so that I could get the flow of income moving again. So those three things, money, relationships, and health, are the things that are most important to us, and we have to keep moving even when we face challenges in those areas.
Yeah, and then you were able to get back on your feet, and since then, or even, well, let's say since then, what's been the most fulfilling part of your entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, Tim, I have to say the biggest part was when I realized that, I could help other people leverage their content and their information doing it the good old fashioned way. And that's by doing workshops, live events, literally back to the basics. And the reason I say that is because a lot of my clients have this dream, like most of us, of being, extremely successful online. And whatever we can do to produce products or services that are evergreen or available, for the online marketplace, and push it through all types of fancy funnels through social media, and, hopefully wake up in the morning with cha-ching in our bank accounts. And, I'll tell you that if you don't have a very big list, or you haven't been doing this for some time, it can get discouraging, because it's not going to happen overnight. But what can happen is the ability for you to still take what it is that you know, your talent, your resources, your time, your content, package it up and provide it to people, even in a small group setting, 5 to 10 people in a room, and then have them experience you that way and pay you for that experience. Opening up the opportunity for them to work with you long term is by far a greater way of enjoying what you're doing and making money than spinning your wheels online trying to figure out how come I'm not getting enough likes on this post. So I found that when I transitioned to really helping some of my clients to leverage the power of live events and workshops, that their businesses turned around. It became that much more, they were working in much more ease and more flow and more joy. I love working in that space. I love connecting with people face to face and in live events. And it's truly what now obviously outside of private coaching, I spend a lot of time working with people on how to develop their own workshops and live events.
Wow. I mean, that I'm so glad you brought that up, Darieth, about people kind of getting caught up in this kind of online funnel system, and it needs to be automatic. And so I can sit on the beach and just look at my phone and just see my bank account keep, adding up and more dollars coming in. And so you're saying, it doesn't always have to be about that. And not a lot of people are making money when they have short lists. And so, but there's other ways you can reach your audience, the people who potentially could utilize your service or product, and do it in a different way, in a smaller fashion, and still have that kind of benefit of being an entrepreneur. And so I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think people initially start out and they don't see the money rolling in that they think they should, and they get discouraged and frustrated.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And it doesn't mean you don't try the online space. And as you grow, you will certainly see some advantage to being there. But take what you got and give it in the way that, people are used to experiencing things. And that's through conversation, hugs, high fives, in a room, sharing it with others. I teach something called the workshop formula, where I show people how to put their content into a structured format so they can deliver it in a very powerful way. How best to promote and market that, even when you don't have an email list, how to convert people from a phone conversation to your live events. And most importantly, how to upsell them to your next product or service or coaching program or whatever you have while they're there experiencing you. And just the power of that I find to be advantageous, particularly if you're just getting started. If you're just getting started as an author, speaker, coach, internet marketer, consultant, it's a great way to still, build your business, make some money doing live events while you're still trying to figure out the whole online thing.
Yeah. Well, speaking of sharing, you have shared an enormous amount of tips and information and gave the listeners some advice that I think is just, it's gold. And that's what we've been looking for. And you also shared your personal story and you kind of opened that up and we're vulnerable. And so I really appreciate you being on today, Darieth. But before we go, I know that you have some gifts. You have some more to give back to the listeners, and let the listeners know about that and where they can find you online and how they can connect with you.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. My website is dariethchisolm.com, DariethChisolm. You can actually watch previous episodes of Hustle and Hard TV as well as listen to the podcast there. My book is there. There's more information about my coaching programs. The program I was just talking about is Workshop Formula. I just completed a 3-part video training series that's free. So if you go to workshopformula.com, you can watch the video training series. There's a hefty download. And then if this sparks your interest and you're looking at developing your own workshops and live events, you can enroll in the course. And there's a button there to enroll. I want to gift your clients, though, with a 10% discount from that course. So if you decide to literally click and enroll in the course, be sure to use promo code LASKIS. So promo code LASKIS, LASKIS, Tim's last name, and you'll get 10% off, and I truly appreciate that. So that's if you're interested in the workshop formula. What I'd love to do also is just to gift everyone with a free audio and download. It's called My 7 Steps to a Successful Side Hustle. And you can download the 7 steps, and also there's a guided audio for that. You can get that at jointhehustle.com. So jointhehustle.com, or text unleash to 33444. So just text the word unleash to 33444. Hit send, put your email in, hit send again, and then I'll email you the 7 steps. So there you go.
Incredible. Thank you, Darieth. And for the listeners, I'll have all the information on the show notes. So if you didn't catch it here, you can rewind and listen to it again, or you can just go over to my website at timlaskis.com and the information will be there. Darieth, thank you. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and I appreciate your time being with us today.
Oh, I totally appreciate it, Tim. Thanks so much for having me on as your guest. And to everyone else, thanks so much for listening, and I wish you all the very best.
Thank you.
Want more entrepreneurial tips? Go to timlaskis.com.